Nathan Cole slammed his resignation letter down on the CEO's glass desk so hard the nameplate rattled. "I'm done." But Victoria Sterling didn't flinch. She picked up the envelope slowly, deliberately, and tore it in half. "No," she said, "you're not." That was the moment Nathan realized this wasn't just a job anymore. This woman, his boss, his enemy, his ghost from 20 years ago, wasn't letting him walk away. And somewhere deep in his chest, he wasn't sure he wanted to. Drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Nathan Cole had survived too many things to be afraid of a closed door. He had survived growing up poor in a city that didn't care about poor people. He had survived 12-hour shifts at a warehouse while studying for his college entrance exams by flashlight in a bathroom because the shared bedroom had no lamp. He had survived the slowest, most devastating kind of grief, the kind that comes when you watch the woman you love disappear, piece by piece, hospital room by hospital room, until one morning the nurses stop pretending and just tell you to go home and get some rest because there's nothing left to wait for. He had survived all of that. He had raised a daughter by himself. He had cooked breakfast at 5:30 in the morning and attended parent-teacher conferences in a suit he had dry cleaned the week before, so it still smelled fresh. He had read bedtime stories in a voice that never cracked, even on the nights when, after his daughter fell asleep, he sat on the hallway floor with his back against her bedroom door and just breathed. So no, a closed door was not going to shake Nathan Cole, except that it did. It was a Monday, January, the kind of January that makes you understand on a cellular level why people in old photographs always looked exhausted, because surviving winter without central heating builds a specific kind of weight into a person's bones that never fully leaves. Nathan had been with Meridian Group for 3 years, project manager, good at his job, not flashy, not political, not the kind of man who remembered to bring donuts on Friday so people would like him. He worked, he delivered, he went home. When Meridian was acquired by Sterling Innovations, nobody panicked in the way movies show people panicking. There were no screaming arguments or dramatic exits. People just got very quiet and very careful, the way livestock get quiet before a storm they can smell but haven't seen yet. Word traveled fast. The new CEO was a woman named Victoria Sterling, 34 years old, daughter of Gerald Sterling, the founder. She had apparently spent 6 years running the European division of her father's company, turning a division that was hemorrhaging money into the most profitable branch of the entire corporation. People said she was brilliant. People also said she was ruthless. The two words seemed to follow her name the way shadows follow headlights. Nathan had not spent a single second worrying about her. He had a daughter to raise and a quarter-end project deadline to hit. Victoria Sterling could be whatever she wanted to be. She was management. He was labor. Those two worlds touched at the paycheck and nowhere else. That was what he believed on Sunday night, when he was packing his daughter Lily's lunch for Monday, tucking a napkin with a small hand-drawn star into the corner of her lunchbox, because she had told him once years ago that finding little surprises in her food made school feel less long. He was still thinking about Lily when his phone buzzed at 8:47 on Monday morning. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Sterling would like to see you in her office at 9 o'clock. Executive Assistant, Sterling Innovations." He read the message twice. His first thought was budget cuts. His second thought was, "I just got here." His third thought was something he didn't examine too closely, something instinctual and old, a reflex from a childhood spent always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. He straightened his tie. He picked up his notepad, and he walked to the elevator. The executive floor was different from the rest of the building. Quieter. The carpet was thicker. The lighting was warmer. The kind of environmental design that costs a lot of money to make feel effortless. Nathan noticed these things the way he noticed everything, not because he was impressed, but because he had spent enough years in enough corporate buildings to understand that the way a company decorated its power center told you exactly what it thought power meant. Sterling Innovations believed power meant calm, controlled, inevitable. He waited outside the office for exactly 4 minutes. The assistant, a young man in a gray blazer who typed without looking at his keyboard, didn't make eye contact. That was fine. Nathan didn't need conversation. At 9 o'clock on the dot, the assistant pressed a button on his desk phone and said, "Mr. Cole is here." A pause, then, "Send him in." The voice was professional, measured, the voice of someone who had spent years learning to sound exactly as large as they needed to sound, and no larger. Nathan opened the door. Victoria Sterling was standing with her back to him when he entered. She was looking out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city below. Gray sky, traffic far below like slow-moving beetles. The kind of view that powerful people buy specifically so they can stand in front of it and feel the size of what they own. The office smelled like coffee and something clean cedar maybe, or eucalyptus. There were very few personal items. A single framed photograph on the credenza, turned at an angle Nathan couldn't read from the door. A small succulent on the corner of the desk, the kind of plant that thrives on neglect. Nathan stepped inside. The door closed behind him. He heard the lock engage. He stopped. Not dramatically, not with alarm. Just he stopped the way any reasonable person stops when they hear a door lock from the inside of a room they weren't expecting to be locked in. Victoria still hadn't turned around. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system and the distant muffled noise of the city outside the glass. Then she turned. Nathan had not seen Victoria Sterling in 20 years. He had not thought about her in almost as long. The human brain in its wisdom builds scar tissue over wounds it cannot afford to keep reopening. He had filed her away somewhere deep and sealed and labeled the past, alongside the memory of his mother leaving and the night his father cried in the kitchen when he thought Nathan was asleep. But the brain also keeps perfect records underneath all that scar tissue. And the moment he saw her face, every record opened at once. She was older. Of course she was. The soft roundness of adolescence had settled into something sharper, more precise. Her dark hair was cut differently than he remembered. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse. Her posture was impeccable, the kind of posture you either inherit from private schooling or build deliberately from years of standing in rooms where everyone is watching you. But her eyes were exactly the same, dark brown, almost black at the center, intelligent, careful, and right now looking at him with an expression that Nathan could not immediately name, not pleasure, not superiority, not the cool evaluation of a CEO taking stock of an employee. Something older than all of that, something that looked almost like fear. She said Nathan, not Mr. Cole, Nathan. The sound of his first name in her voice hit him somewhere below his sternum, in a place he hadn't known was still undefended. He said nothing. She said, "Do you remember me?" The question sat in the air between them like smoke. Did he remember her? Nathan breathed once slow and steady through his nose. He had a policy built over many years and many difficult rooms of never letting his face do anything his brain hadn't authorized first. It was a survival skill from childhood, perfected in hospital waiting rooms and boardroom presentations, and every moment in between when the world had wanted to see him crack. "Yes," he said, "I remember you." Victoria Sterling didn't flinch, but something in her shoulders shifted infinitesimally the way a person shifts when they've been holding their breath and finally let it out. "Sit down," she said. "Please." It was the please that got him, not the command, the please. He sat. She sat across from him, not behind the desk, but in the chair on the other side of the small seating area to the left of her desk, two leather chairs facing each other across a low table, equal ground architecturally. He noticed that too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan said, "Why am I here, Ms. Sterling?" She said, "I'm not sure how to answer that." "Try." She looked at him. Not the look of a CEO, the look of a person. "I wanted to see if you were real," she said. "I've been preparing for this conversation for 6 months. I had it planned out. I knew what I was going to say." She paused. "And now I can't remember any of it." Nathan said, "What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you." "Then why did you hire me?" The silence stretched. "Because I owed you something," she said. "And I didn't know how else to start paying it back." Here is what Nathan Cole remembered about Victoria Sterling. He remembered being 15 years old in the hallway of Jefferson High in November, when the heat still worked most days, but not always, and he was wearing his brown corduroy jacket, the same jacket he had worn since September, because it was the only warm jacket he owned, and he had grown into it over the summer, and his father had quietly exhaled with relief about that, because it meant they wouldn't need to buy a new one this year. He remembered the group of kids near the water fountain. Victoria was in the center of them. She was always in the center. That was where the daughters of wealthy men stood in the center, with the light on them, with everyone else arranged around them, like a kind of orbit. He remembered walking past. He remembered the laughter starting before he understood it was directed at him. And he remembered Victoria's voice, light and easy, the voice of someone who had never once doubted that the room would laugh when she wanted it to, saying, "Oh, look, he's wearing the jacket again. Does he sleep in it? Do you think he showers in it?" The laughter was enormous. The hallway was full of it. Nathan had kept walking. He had not run. He had not cried. He had not said anything. He had made himself put one foot in front of the other, all the way to the end of the hallway, through the door and out into the cold air where he sat on the school steps. For 6 minutes he counted until the feeling passed, and he could trust his own face again. He had told his father that night that he didn't need a new jacket yet. The old one was still fine. He had said it casually because his father had enough things to carry without adding this. He had never told anyone what happened in that hallway, and he had never forgotten it. "You humiliated me," Nathan said. His voice was even, factual, the way a geologist describes the age of a rock formation, not emotional about it, just precisely clear. Victoria didn't look away. "Yes," she said, "I did. In front of approximately 40 people. Yes, because I wore the same jacket too many times." Victoria said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. "I was 15, Nathan said. My father worked 60 hours a week to keep the lights on. I had one warm jacket. You had—" He stopped himself, drew a breath, let it out. "It doesn't matter what you had." "It does matter," Victoria said quietly. "It matters because I knew. I knew you weren't like the other kids. I knew that jacket wasn't a choice, and I did it anyway." She folded her hands in her lap. "I did it because everyone was watching, and I wanted them to laugh, and you were just there, and I was—" She stopped. "I was 17 years old, and I was already terrified of the day someone would figure out that everything I had was my father's, and none of it was mine. And so I pointed at someone with less, and I—" She stopped again. "Made everyone look at me instead of you," Nathan said. "Yes, so that nobody would look too closely at you." "Yes." Nathan leaned back in the chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. 1 beat, 2, then he looked back at her. "And you think hiring me makes that right?" "No," Victoria said. "I don't think that. I'm not that stupid. Hiring you doesn't make anything right. It just means I finally stopped pretending the wrong thing didn't happen." Nathan went home that night and made dinner, pasta with the garlic butter sauce Lily liked because it had exactly 0 vegetables in it, which she considered a significant moral victory over the food pyramid. Lily was 8 years old. She had her mother's laugh, that specific kind of laugh that started in the belly and arrived at the surface slightly delayed like a message sent from somewhere deep. And she had Nathan's stubbornness, which he considered both a gift and an ongoing logistical challenge. "Dad," she said, spinning her fork around her bowl in a way that was technically making a mess, but that he had stopped fighting 6 months ago. "Are you okay?" "I'm good, Bug." "You're doing the face." "What face?" "The thinking too hard face. Your eyebrows go like—" She scrunched her forehead into an exaggerated knot. "Like that, but smaller." He laughed. It surprised him, the laugh, the way genuine laughter sometimes does when it arrives before your brain has finished deciding whether you're allowed to feel good. "I'm fine," he said. "Just a strange day." Strange how— I thought about how to explain it. 8-year-olds deserved honest answers in proportion to their capacity to use them. "Someone I knew a long time ago turned out to be my new boss," he said, "and it was unexpected." Lily considered this with the gravity that 8-year-olds sometimes bring to large questions. "Were they mean to you?" Nathan looked at her. "Once," he said. "A long time ago. And now they're your boss." "Yep." Lily pointed her fork at him. "You should make really good PowerPoints, so good that they can't be mean to you anymore because they need you too much." Nathan stared at his daughter. "That," he said, "is actually pretty sound corporate strategy." Lily went back to her pasta, looking satisfied. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nathan returned to work. He did his job. He was careful and professional, and he put his head down, and he delivered what he promised, the way he had always done, not for applause, not for recognition, but because he had learned a long time ago that excellent work was the one argument nobody could effectively rebut. Victoria kept their interactions formal, professional. She didn't seek him out. She didn't treat him differently in meetings, if anything. She was slightly harder on his presentations than on others, which he respected even when it frustrated him. She was not trying to make things easy. She was trying to make things real. But the office noticed. Offices always notice. There's a specific kind of attention that moves through a professional environment when two people have history invisible to most unmistakable to the ones paying attention. Small things. The way a meeting paused a half-second longer than necessary when Nathan spoke, and Victoria processed his words before responding. The way she never called on him first, so nobody could accuse her of favoritism, but always had a follow-up question specifically for him after the room moved on. People talked. People always talk. The ones who talked loudest were the ones who had something to protect. Richard Blake had been at Sterling Innovations for 11 years. He had the kind of longevity in a company that people mistake for loyalty, but is actually closer to strategic endurance. He had outlasted 3 CEOs, 2 restructurings, and 1 near bankruptcy that nobody in the industry talked about anymore because the people who remembered it had all been carefully managed out of the organization. Richard Blake was 51 years old. He wore expensive watches and had the handshake of a man who had studied handshakes. He laughed at the right moments and said the right things to the right people, and had spent the better part of a decade positioning himself as the inevitable next CEO of Sterling Innovations when Gerald Sterling finally stepped back. Then Gerald Sterling brought in his daughter, and Richard Blake's career trajectory bent, not broke bend, just bent. He still had his title, Senior Executive Vice President, still had his corner office, still had the salary and the car allowance and the assistant who answered his email when he was traveling. But he didn't have the thing he had spent 11 years building toward, and he had to sit across conference tables from a 34-year-old woman who hadn't been born yet when he had first walked into this building, and he had to listen to her make decisions that he believed with complete sincerity should have been his to make. Richard Blake was not an evil man in the way that word gets used in movies. He was something slightly more dangerous, a man with a grievance and enough sophistication to act on it indirectly. The first sign was a project report that went missing. Nathan had submitted it. His assistant confirmed the submission. The version control system logged the upload, and then somehow the file that appeared in the shared folder was not the file Nathan had uploaded. It was an earlier draft, an unfinished draft, with numbers that were outdated and conclusions that were incomplete. The department head, a man named Garrett, who Nathan had respected until that moment, presented the wrong version in the Monday morning briefing without checking with Nathan first. Nathan sat in that meeting and listened to his own incomplete work being described as his deliverable and felt something cold move through him. "That's not the final version," he said. Garrett looked up. "This is what was in the folder." "Then something happened to the folder," Nathan said, "because I submitted the final version on Thursday at 4:15. I can pull the upload confirmation from my email." Garrett's expression did something complicated. "Nathan, I'll send you the confirmation right now." He did, right there in the meeting from his phone. There was a long silence. The meeting moved on. But Nathan sat with that cold feeling for the rest of the day, turning it over, examining it the way his father used to examine a car engine methodically without panic, looking for the thing that was wrong before it became the thing that failed completely. He told Victoria that afternoon. He went to her office without an appointment, which her assistant tried to stop him from doing, and which he politely declined to be stopped from doing, and which resulted in him standing in her doorway saying, "I need 5 minutes, it's not personal, it's operational." She looked at him for a moment. Then she told her assistant it was fine. He sat down across from her desk this time, not in the informal seating area. This was a work conversation. He laid out what happened, calmly, with the documentation he had already pulled up on his phone. File upload confirmation time-stamped, email chain time-stamped, the discrepancy between the version he submitted and the version that appeared in the folder. Victoria listened without interrupting. She had the specific quality of attention that made you feel like the thing you were saying was the only thing in the world that mattered right now, which Nathan suspected was partly strategic and partly genuine, and he hadn't yet figured out the proportion. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You think someone changed the file," she said. "I think someone changed the file," he said. "Yes. Not a system error. System errors don't replace complete documents with earlier incomplete drafts of the same document. They corrupt or they delete. They don't substitute. She looked at him steadily. "Do you know who—" "No," he said. "Not yet." "Are you going to find out?" He met her eyes. "Are you going to let me?" She said, "Yes." He found the second sign 3 days later, a deadline that he had flagged in writing 2 weeks in advance as requiring additional resource allocation. A note that appeared in his sent items timestamp delivery, confirmed had been marked in the project management system as flagged 3 days after the deadline, as if he had raised the concern late, as if he had been reactive instead of proactive. If you didn't check the email timestamps against the system timestamps, it looked like negligence. Nathan checked the timestamps. The third sign came the following week. A client call that Nathan had handled successfully with notes and a follow-up report generated a complaint from the client. The complaint referenced things Nathan had allegedly said that he had not said. The complaint was specific and detailed and written in the precise bureaucratic language of someone who had been coached on how to write an effective complaint, not the frustrated, uneven language of someone genuinely upset. Nathan looked at the complaint letter for a long time. Then he looked at the project management system discrepancy again. Then he looked at the file substitution, and he felt the cold thing in his chest again, sharper now, more specific. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a system error. This wasn't one disgruntled client. This was a pattern, and patterns have architects. He sat in his car in the parking garage that evening for 22 minutes. He thought about Lily. He thought about the bedtime story he had read her last night, something about a rabbit who found his way home through the snow, which was too young for her now, really, but she asked for it sometimes on hard days, and he had long since stopped questioning the comfort she took from it. I thought about his father, who had spent 30 years doing good work for people who never fully saw him, and who had retired with a small pension and a savings account that he described as comfortable, by which he meant enough, by which he meant I didn't ask for more because I was afraid to want it. He thought about the 40 people in that hallway 20 years ago. He thought about the resignation letter that was already taking shape in his mind, the clean and dignified language of a man who walks away with his head up because he refuses to be the reason someone else's ceiling falls in. He sat with all of that for 22 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and called the babysitter to say he'd be home by 7. Then he drove back into the parking garage, took the elevator to the 14th floor, went back to his desk, and opened the project management system. He was not going to walk away, not yet, not until he understood exactly what was happening, because Nathan Cole had survived too many things to be afraid of a closed door. But he had also learned the hard way that some closed doors need to be opened before you can walk through them. And someone in this building was very deliberately, very carefully trying to make sure he never found the handle. Nathan spent the next 72 hours doing what he had always done when the world stopped making sense. He worked. Not the frantic defensive kind of working that scared people do when they feel the ground shifting underneath them. The methodical kind, the quiet kind, the kind his father had modeled for him in that small repair shop above which they had lived for 11 years, head down, hands steady, one problem at a time, because panic was a luxury and precision was survival. He started with what he knew for certain. The file had been changed. That was documented. The project management timestamps had been manipulated. That was documented. The client complaint had been written in language that didn't match the tone of any genuine complaint he had ever received in 12 years of project management, and he had received a few genuine ones and knew exactly what they looked and felt like, ragged, emotional, specific, in the way that hurt is specific, not in the way that legal strategy is specific. That was documented. 3 incidents. 3 different vectors, all targeting the same outcome. Nathan Cole looks incompetent, unreliable, and possibly dishonest. He sat with that word for a while, dishonest, because that was the move, wasn't it? Not just making him look bad at his job, making him look like someone who covered his tracks, who submitted false records, who manufactured evidence of his own competence. That was a different category of accusation. That was the kind of thing that didn't just end a job, it ended a career. He needed to understand who had access to the project management system at an administrative level, access to the shared folder architecture, access to the client communication channel. He made a list. He kept it in a notebook, handwritten, because he trusted paper in a way he had stopped trusting servers. The list had 11 names on it. He crossed off 7 by the end of the first day, based on access levels and login records that his IT clearance allowed him to review. He wasn't supposed to be looking at individual login records. Technically, that required an HR request, but he had enough system access from his project management role that he could see aggregate login activity on the folders in question, and what he saw was enough to narrow the field. 4 names left. He sat with those 4 names and thought about motivation, because access was the how, motivation was the why, and the why was what would eventually tell him the who. He thought about who in this building had reason to want him specifically to fail. He had been here 3 months. He hadn't made enemies. He was careful, quiet professional. He hadn't stepped on anyone's territory, hadn't competed for anyone's project, hadn't said the wrong thing at the wrong lunch table. But he hadn't been here when Meridian was acquired. And he hadn't chosen to be the person Victoria Sterling called into her office first. He hadn't chosen any of that. But someone else had watched it happen, and someone else had drawn conclusions from it. I was crossing names off his list when his phone rang. It was Marcus Webb, the only friend Nathan had managed to maintain from his pre-Meridian days, a man who had been his college roommate, who had attended both his wedding and his wife's funeral, and who now worked in cybersecurity consulting, and therefore knew things about corporate digital architecture that most people assumed only happened in movies. "You called me 3 times, Marcus said by way of greeting. "I need a favor," Nathan said. "The kind with paperwork or the kind without, the kind where you tell me what to look for without officially looking for it yourself." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Nathan, I know. That's a very careful sentence you just said. I know. You want to tell me what's going on?" Nathan told him. He told him everything. The file substitution, the timestamp manipulation, the client complaint. He told him about Victoria, the history between them, the way the office had been watching their interactions like a slow-motion tennis match. He told him about the 4 names on his list. Marcus listened without interrupting. That was one of the things Nathan had always valued about him, the ability to hear a whole problem before trying to solve it. When Nathan finished, Marcus said, "System-level file substitution requires admin credentials or a specific exploit in the version control software. The timestamp manipulation is harder. That's usually either a direct database edit or someone with root access to the project management backend, which narrows it significantly. You're not looking for someone with standard executive access. You're looking for someone who either has IT system privileges they shouldn't have, or someone who has a relationship with someone in IT who does." Nathan said, "How do I find out which—" "You look at who's close to the IT department. Not officially, not org chart close, actually close, lunch close, favor close." Nathan thought about that. Then he said, "I owe you." "You owe me dinner," Marcus said. "Somewhere with a wine list. I'm tired of eating at places that have TVs above the bar." "Done." "Nathan." A pause. "Be careful. Whoever did this is sophisticated enough to cover their tracks once. They'll cover them again." "I know. And if they figure out you're looking—" "I know Marcus." A longer pause. "How's Lily?" Nathan smiled despite himself. "She told me my PowerPoints needed to be good enough that my enemies would be afraid to fire me." Marcus laughed, the deep, genuine kind. "That kid is going to run a country someday." "God help the country," Nathan said, but he was still smiling when he hung up. The answer came from a direction he hadn't expected. It came from Donna Park, the administrative coordinator for the operations floor, a woman in her late 50s who had been with the company since before the first restructuring, and who had survived every political season Sterling Innovations had ever cycled through by being simultaneously indispensable and invisible. She knew where everything was remembered every meeting and had developed over 20-plus years of finely calibrated radar for when something in the building was wrong. She stopped Nathan in the hallway on a Wednesday morning. She didn't say anything alarming. She didn't whisper or look over her shoulder. She simply fell into step beside him as he walked toward the elevator and said in the pleasant, unloaded tone of someone commenting on the weather, "The lunch orders from the 4th floor conference room come through my system. Mr. Blake orders for 3 people on Tuesdays. He only has 2 direct reports." Nathan kept walking at the same pace. "Interesting," he said. "The 3rd lunch, for the past 6 weeks, always the same order." She paused. "Tom Heller from IT likes that particular sandwich, the one with the roasted peppers." Nathan said nothing. "I just noticed," Donna said pleasantly. "I notice things. It's a professional hazard after 22 years. She smiled at the elevator as the doors opened. "Have a good morning, Mr. Cole." She stepped off toward the copy room. Nathan rode the elevator alone. He stood very still in it, Richard Blake. He knew the name. He knew the title. Senior Executive Vice President. He had sat across from Richard Blake in 2 all-hands meetings and 1 department briefing. He had registered Richard Blake the way you register furniture in a room you're passing through, present functional, not yet relevant. Now he went back through every interaction with a different lens. Richard Blake, who had been with the company 11 years. Richard Blake, who had been the acting bridge CEO during the 6 weeks between Gerald Sterling stepping back and Victoria's appointment. Richard Blake, who had Nathan now recalled with precision, been the one to summarize Nathan's delayed flag report incorrectly in that Monday morning briefing 2 weeks ago before Nathan had corrected him. Richard Blake, who had smiled at the correction with a warmth that Nathan had clocked at the time as professional grace and now understood as something else entirely. He sat down at his desk. He pulled up his notes. He wrote the name at the top of a fresh page. Then he put the notebook in his briefcase and went to do his job because the best thing he could do right now, the only thing that was entirely within his control, was to be so unambiguously, documentably excellent at his work that the next manufactured crisis would have less to stick to. I was leaving the building that evening when he ran into Richard Blake at the lobby elevator bank. It was 5:48. The lobby was busy, the end-of-day exodus of people who had somewhere to be. Blake was on his phone, his coat already on, and he glanced up when Nathan approached and gave him the smile, the warm, professional, utterly frictionless smile. "Nathan," he said, as though they ran into each other regularly, and it was always a pleasure. "Richard," Nathan said. Blake ended his call. "How are you settling in? 3 months now, right?" "Something like that," Nathan said. "Adjustment period," Blake said, with the authority of someone describing a phenomenon they've observed from a great distance. "It takes time with an acquisition. The cultures don't always mesh cleanly. I've seen it before." He nodded sagely. "You're doing well, though. I've heard good things." Nathan looked at him, not aggressively, not with accusation, with the same calm, open expression he used when he was waiting for a spreadsheet to finish calculating. "Have you?" he said. "Absolutely." Blake pressed the elevator call button. "Victoria speaks highly of your work. Which well?" He smiled again, and this time there was the faintest thing underneath it barely visible like a bone seen through skin. "It's good to have advocates." "It's better to have results," Nathan said. Blake glanced at him. A quick assessment, well-practiced, nearly imperceptible. Then the smile broadened. "Of course," he said. "Of course it is." The elevator arrived. They rode it to the parking level in a silence that was entirely civil and entirely loaded, and Nathan spent the whole 40-second ride memorizing every micro-expression that crossed Richard Blake's face, filing each one in the part of his brain labeled evidence. I got home at 6:30. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. Her backpack exploded around her in the specific chaos of an 8-year-old who considers organization an optional activity. Mrs. Reyes, the babysitter, a retired school teacher from 3 blocks over, who had been keeping Lily company since Nathan started at Meridian, was washing dishes and listening to the Spanish-language radio station she kept at low volume in whatever room she occupied. "Dad," Lily looked up. "What's a synonym for suspicious?" Nathan set his briefcase down, hung up his coat, sat down across from her at the table. "Dubious," he said. "Wary, skeptical. Which one sounds smartest?" "Dubious." She wrote it down with the satisfaction of a child who has just upgraded their vocabulary. "Mrs. Reyes made rice," she said. "She put vegetables in it, but I already found most of them." "Impressive detective work," Nathan said. Mrs. Reyes called from the kitchen in her particular mix of English and Spanish that she used when she was mildly exasperated. "She found them and put them on a napkin, Mr. Cole, like evidence." "She comes by it honestly," Nathan said. After Mrs. Reyes left after dinner, after the bath and bedtime routine that Nathan had long since streamlined to a practiced ritual, teeth pajamas, 1 story, 1 glass of water, lights out. He sat at the kitchen table with his notebook and his laptop and a cup of coffee that was more important as an object to hold than as a beverage to consume. He thought about what Marcus had said. Sophisticated enough to cover their tracks once, they'll cover them again. I thought about Donna Park and the Tuesday lunch orders and Tom Heller from IT. He thought about the elevator ride and Richard Blake's smile and the bone underneath the skin of it. He opened a new document on his laptop. He started building a timeline. Every incident, every date, every piece of documentation he had saved. He organized it not like a list of complaints. Lists of complaints were easy to dismiss, but like a case file, the way a prosecutor would build it. Chronological, sourced, cross-referenced. He worked until midnight. When he finally closed the laptop, the house was entirely quiet, and outside the kitchen window the neighborhood had gone dark, in the way it went dark in the middle of the week. No parties, no late arrivals, just the orange glow of the streetlight and the distant sound of a car that was going somewhere else. He sat there for a minute. I thought about his father, who had never once, not once in 30 years of being underestimated and underpaid and overlooked. He had never once done anything like this. He had never built a case. He had never pushed back. He had absorbed it quietly and kept working and called it dignity. Nathan loved his father more than he had words for, but he had decided a long time ago that there was a difference between dignity and resignation, and he was not going to spend his life learning to wear resignation the way his father had worn it, like a second skin so familiar he stopped noticing the weight. Not for himself, and not for Lily, who was 8 years old and who found vegetables on a napkin like evidence, and who was going to grow up watching her father do something about it when something was wrong. He closed the notebook. He went to bed. The next day, Richard Blake made his move. Nathan found out about it the same way he found out about most things in that building, not from an announcement, not from a meeting, but from the specific quality of silence that falls over an office when something has already happened, and everyone is waiting to see who doesn't know yet. He walked into the morning briefing and he could feel it, the avoidance, the eyes that almost met his, and then redirected the slightly too deliberate normalcy of people who had recently had a conversation they weren't going to tell him about. Garrett, the department head, was already at the table. He looked at Nathan with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and landing somewhere in the territory of uncomfortable. Blake was there too, sitting 2 seats down from the head of the table, which was not his usual seat. His usual seat was closer to the door. Nathan had noticed the seating habits of everyone in this room over 3 months. The way you notice the traffic patterns of a city you're learning to drive in automatically without trying. The meeting started. The first 20 minutes were routine. Then Garrett cleared his throat and said in the particular tone of someone who has rehearsed their words, "We need to address the Callaway account discrepancy." Nathan set his pen down, slowly. The Callaway account was a client Nathan had brought over from Meridian during the acquisition. He had managed the transition personally. He had documented every step. He had a paper trail that was frankly excessive because he had worked at enough companies during enough transitions to know that the paper trail was the difference between being right and being able to prove you were right. The client, Garrett said, not quite looking at Nathan, has indicated that there may be a billing error in the Q4 transition figures. They've requested an audit. Nathan said, "The Q4 figures are correct." Nathan, I said they're correct. I have the original documentation, the client sign-offs, and the transition verification logs. All dated, all signed, all in the system. He looked around the table. Which system version are we looking at right now? Because I'd like to know if we're working from the same numbers. A beat, Blake said pleasantly from 2 seats down. Nathan, nobody's accusing you of anything. This is just standard protocol for an audit request. Nathan looked at him. I know what an audit request looks like, Richard, he said. I also know what a manufactured audit request looks like, and I know the difference. The room got very quiet. Blake smiled, the warm professional smile, the one with the bone underneath. That's a strong word, he said. Manufactured. Yes, Nathan said. It is. Another beat. Longer this time, Garrett said carefully. Nathan, why don't we take this offline? You and I can review the documentation this afternoon. That's fine, Nathan said. He picked up his pen. He looked back at Blake. I'll bring everything. The original files, the upload confirmations, the email chains with timestamps, everything. He held Blake's gaze for 1 extra second. I keep very thorough records. Blake's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes did, and Nathan saw it. He filed it away precisely in the part of his brain labeled evidence. I was in Garrett's office at 2 o'clock with a folder that was 43 pages thick. Garrett looked at it the way people look at something they weren't expecting to have to take seriously. Nathan, he said, this is complete, Nathan said. Every transaction, every communication, every sign-off, all of it cross-referenced against the client's own records, which I requested from the Callaway account manager directly here this section, because I anticipated this conversation might happen, and I wanted to make sure we were working from a shared baseline. Garrett leafed through the pages. He was quiet for a long time. "You anticipated this," he said finally. "I've been anticipating something like this," Nathan said, "for about 3 weeks. Garrett looked up. "What do you mean?" Nathan sat back in his chair. He looked at Garrett, really looked at him the way he had looked at Blake in the elevator, assessing reading, making decisions about how much to say and to whom. Garrett was not malicious. Nathan had concluded that much. Garrett was a man who managed upward and downward simultaneously, and had learned over many years to stay out of conflicts that weren't his to resolve. But this one was going to reach Garrett whether he wanted it to or not. "There's a pattern," Nathan said. 3 incidents over the past 3 weeks, each one designed to make me look negligent or dishonest. File substitutions, timestamp anomalies, client complaints in language that doesn't match the account's communication history. He paused. "This audit request is the 4th. Garrett was very still. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "I know." "Do you know who—" "I have a theory," Nathan said. "I'm not going to share it with you yet because theories without evidence are just allegations, and allegations without evidence in a corporate environment tend to be redirected at the person making them." He met Garrett's eyes. "I want the evidence first." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the 43-page folder. He looked at Nathan. "The Callaway documentation is clean," he said finally. "I can see that. I'll communicate to the client that there's no discrepancy." "Thank you." "Nathan." Garrett hesitated. "Be careful." "Everybody keeps telling me that," Nathan said. "It's worth repeating." Nathan picked up the folder. He stood up. At the door he stopped and looked back. "Garrett," he said, "you've been here a long time, longer than Blake even." Garrett said nothing, but he didn't look away. "You know what's happening," Nathan said. "You might not know all of it, but you know the shape of it." He paused. "I'm not asking you to do anything right now. I'm just noting that at some point staying out of it is also a choice, and choices have consequences too." He left the office. In the hallway, he walked to the men's room, turned on the cold water, and held his wrists under it for 30 seconds. A trick he had learned years ago for when his blood pressure was running too hot to think clearly. Then he dried his hands, straightened his tie, and went back to his desk. That evening, Victoria called him. Not a meeting request through her assistant, his personal cell phone, which she had from the HR onboarding paperwork, which nobody from the executive level had ever used to contact him directly. He answered on the second ring. "I heard about the Callaway meeting," she said. "Word travels fast," Nathan said. "It travels faster when someone wants it to." A pause. "Are you okay?" I was sitting in his car in the parking garage again, a habit he had apparently developed. "I'm fine," he said. "Don't do that." "Don't do what?" "Don't say I'm fine in that voice that means you're carrying something you've decided you're not allowed to put down." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Not quite vulnerability, but something adjacent to it. Something that cost her something to say. "I've been watching you manage this alone for 3 weeks. I should have come to you sooner." Nathan was quiet. "I know why you haven't told me," she said. "Because telling me means trusting me, and trusting me requires something I haven't earned yet." He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. "I'm going to ask you something," Victoria said, "and I want you to answer honestly, even if the honest answer is not what I want to hear." "All right," he said. "Do you believe I didn't know about this?" I thought about it. Genuinely thought about it the way he thought about difficult problems without rushing, without the comfort of a quick answer. He thought about her face in the meeting room that first day. He thought about the way she had listened to him when he reported the file discrepancy. He thought about the investigation she had quietly opened. He knew about it, though she hadn't told him because Donna Park noticed things and sometimes shared them carefully with the right people. "Yes," he said. "I believe you didn't know." He heard her exhale, just slightly. "Nathan," she said, "I need you to let me help." He looked at the concrete ceiling of the parking garage, at the fluorescent lights that buzzed very faintly if you listened for it. "There's something I need first," he said. "What?" "I need to know that if I bring you what I have, all of it, the documentation, the theory, the names, I need to know that it won't disappear, that it won't get managed and redirected and quietly resolved in a way that protects the company, but not the truth." Silence. "I need to know," he said, "that you're not going to choose the easier outcome." Her voice when it came was quiet and certain in the way that very few things in Nathan Cole's life had ever been quiet and certain. "I'm not going to choose the easier outcome," she said. I stopped making that choice a long time ago. It took me too long and it cost too much, but I stopped." He sat with that for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'll bring you what I have. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. A pause. Then, "I'll be there. Victoria." He hesitated. "The person behind this, they're going to know something changed when I walk into your office tomorrow. They're watching. They've been watching this whole time." "I know," she said, "which means they might accelerate." "I know that too. So whatever they're planning next, Nathan," her voice was steady, clear, the voice of someone who had made the decision before the conversation and was simply now living inside it. "Let them. Let them show me exactly who they are, because I'm done pretending I don't see it." He started his car. 9 o'clock, he said. 9 o'clock, she said. He drove home. The city moved past his windows, the lights of it, the ordinary, enormous life of a place full of people who were all carrying something their own, closed doors, their own patterns, their own carefully documented evidence of the ways the world had tried to make them invisible. He thought about what Lily had said. "Make your PowerPoint so good your enemies are afraid to fire you." He thought about the 43-page folder. He almost smiled. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow they would see what kind of evidence a man could build when he'd spent his whole life learning that nobody was going to build it for him. He pulled into his street. The porch light was on. It was always on when he came home. He had a timer on it set to come on at dusk, because coming home to a lit house was something he had decided quietly after his wife died was a thing worth the minor effort of a timer and a working bulb. Small things mattered. He had always known that. He just hadn't always been able to afford to act like it. He was getting out of the car when his phone buzzed. Not Victoria, not Marcus, a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Silence on the other end. Then a voicemail professionally modulated the voice of someone who chose every word like a chess move. "Mr. Cole, I think it would be in your best interest to reconsider tomorrow's meeting." Nathan stood in his driveway in the cold air and said very quietly, "Who is this?" More silence. "Someone who knows how these situations tend to end," the voice said. "For people like you." The line went dead. Nathan stood there for 3 seconds. Then he put the phone in his pocket, walked to his front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside where the house was warm and smelled like the dinner Mrs. Reyes had left on the stove, and where his daughter was asleep in her room down the hall, breathing steadily in the darkness, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dream, when the world is still fundamentally safe and their fathers are still standing. He locked the door behind him. He stood in the hallway. He took one breath. And then he went to the kitchen and took out his notebook and wrote down the time of the call, the number, the exact words, and the exact quality of the voice, the way it had tried to sound casual and landed somewhere closer to controlled, in the way that fear sometimes sounds when it has dressed itself in a very expensive suit. Because Nathan Cole had survived too many things to be frightened by a phone call. But he had also learned in 36 years of living that when someone tells you to stop it, usually means you're getting very, very close. He didn't sleep well. That wasn't unusual. Nathan had not slept well since the year his wife got sick, and he had long since made his peace with it, the way you make peace with a bad knee or a scar that changes color with the weather. You accommodate it, you build around it, you stop expecting it to go away. But that night was different. That night he lay in the dark and listened to the house settle the small creaks and shifts of a structure, doing what structures do in the cold, and he thought about the phone call, not about who made it because he was fairly certain he already knew the answer to that. He thought about the words. People like you. He had heard that phrase before in various forms in various rooms, spoken by various people who believed that the category they were placing him in was obvious and agreed upon and permanent. People like you was a sentence that only worked if the person hearing it accepted the category, if they agreed silently that the category was real. Nathan had stopped accepting it somewhere around the age of 19, standing in a financial aid office, being told that his application was incomplete, and he had looked at the woman across the desk and said quietly that he would like to know which specific documents were missing, and he would like that information in writing, please. She had looked at him with mild surprise. She had given him the list. He had come back 2 days later with every item on it organized in a manila folder with a table of contents he had typed on the library computer. He had learned early that the best response to people like you was an extremely well-organized manila folder. He got up at 5:15, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table and reviewed everything he was bringing to Victoria's office in less than 4 hours. The case file he had built over the past 3 weeks was thorough. It was not perfect, he knew its gaps. The places where the evidence was circumstantial, where the logical chain required inference. But it was honest. Every claim was documented. Every document was sourced. Every source was verifiable. He added the phone call to the end of it. Time, number, transcript, tonal assessment. He knew the number would trace back to a prepaid or to nothing at all, but the call itself was a data point. It meant someone knew about the 9 o'clock meeting, which meant someone had access to information they shouldn't have had, which was itself a form of evidence. Howe was on his second cup of coffee when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair destroyed by sleep, one sock on, and one apparently lost in the journey from her bedroom. "Dad," she said with the gravity of someone reporting a natural disaster. "There's no cereal." "There's oatmeal," Nathan said. She stared at him. "Dad?" "There's also toast." She shuffled to the table and sat down across from him. She looked at the papers and the notebook and the coffee cup and his face in that order. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I slept a little." "Your eyes look like when you stayed up for the Meridian deadline." "I'm fine, Bug." She propped her chin on her hands and looked at him with the specific, unfiltered attention that children have before the world teaches them that looking too directly at people is impolite. "Is it the work thing again?" she asked. "With the boss lady." "It's a work thing," he said. "Are you going to fix it?" He looked at his daughter, her mother's eyes, his father's jaw, and something in the set of her expression that was entirely her own, something he didn't have a category for yet, because she was still becoming it. "Yes," he said, "I'm going to fix it." She nodded, apparently satisfied with this, and went back to the problem of breakfast. She ate her oatmeal without complaining, which Nathan privately considered a significant indicator of how well she had read the room. He dropped her at school at 7:45. She got out of the car and then turned back and knocked on the passenger window. He rolled it down. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, make the PowerPoints really good." He watched her walk through the school doors before he pulled away. Victoria's assistant showed him in at exactly 9 o'clock. Victoria was at her desk this time, not standing at the window, not waiting in the informal seating area. At her desk working, which he understood was a deliberate signal. "We are here as professionals. This is work." He sat down across from her and set the folder on the desk between them. She looked at it, then at him. "How long did this take you?" 3 weeks of assembly," he said. 12 years of preparation." She opened the folder. He watched her read. He had learned to read people by watching them read the pace of the eye movement, the places where it slowed or stopped, the micro-expressions that crossed a face when a document confirmed something suspected versus when it revealed something unexpected. Victoria was a controlled reader. She didn't react visibly, but he saw her pause at the timestamp comparison section. He saw something shift in her jaw at the client complaint analysis. And when she reached the phone call entry at the end, the final page added, "That morning she stopped reading entirely and looked up. Last night," she said. It was not a question. "Around 8:40, he said, "after I confirmed the meeting with you." "Which means someone knew about this meeting before 9 this morning." "Yes." She closed the folder. She set her hands flat on the desk on either side of it, a gesture Nathan had not seen her make before, something deliberate and stabilizing, the physical equivalent of drawing a breath before speaking. "Nathan," she said, "I want you to listen to me carefully." "I'm listening." "What you've built here," she touched the folder lightly, "this is not a complaint. This is not a grievance. This is a prosecutable case of corporate sabotage." She paused. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "I understand what it could be," he said. "I also understand that what something could be and what something becomes are two very different things in a corporate environment, depending on who decides to act on it." She met his eyes. "I'm going to act on it." "Victoria, I'm going to act on it," she said again, and this time the steadiness in her voice had a different quality. Not the managed steadiness of a CEO delivering a decision, but the absolute steadiness of a person who has already made a choice they are not going to unmake. "I know what you're thinking. I know you're sitting there calculating the odds that I'll get halfway through this and then decide the political cost is too high and quietly bury it. I know that's what you're thinking, because that's the logical thing to think based on every experience you've had in rooms like this." He said nothing. "And I know," she said more quietly, "that I don't have the credibility with you yet to ask you to trust me. I know I haven't earned that. But I'm asking anyway." She paused. "Because the alternative is watching you walk out of this building with a clean conscience and a destroyed career, and I am not going to do that." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" She had a legal notepad ready. She pulled it toward her and picked up a pen. "Tell me everything, not the documentation, I have that. Tell me the parts that aren't written down, your read on people, your instincts, who you've spoken to, what you noticed, what felt wrong before you had language for why it felt wrong." So he told her. He told her about Donna Park and the Tuesday lunches and Tom Heller's sandwich order. He told her about the elevator ride with Blake and the bone underneath the smile. He told her about Garrett's careful neutrality and what it told him about what Garrett suspected without being willing to name. He told her about Marcus's assessment of the technical access required for the file manipulation. He told her about every conversation, every look, every moment in 3 weeks that had felt like the edge of something he couldn't quite see the shape of. She wrote. She asked questions. Good questions, the kind that didn't lead, that opened things up rather than funneling them. He had not expected that from her. He had expected executive efficiency, the processing of data toward a predetermined conclusion. What he got instead was something that felt closer to genuine inquiry. She wanted to understand, not just to act. That surprised him enough that he noticed it. When he finished, she set down her pen and sat back. She looked at the notepad, then the folder, then him. "Richard Blake," she said. "That's my conclusion," he said. "I don't have direct evidence connecting him to the technical execution yet. But the pattern is consistent, the motivation is clear, and the access chain runs through his relationship with Tom Heller." "Tom Heller can be deposed," she said, "in a formal investigation." "Yes." "Which requires me to open a formal investigation." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "If I open a formal investigation and Blake finds out before I have enough to act decisively—" "He'll accelerate," Nathan said. "He already called me last night, which tells me he's not operating calmly anymore. He's rattled, which means he'll either go quiet and start covering tracks, or he'll make a large move before I can." "Which kind of man is he?" Nathan thought about the lobby elevator, the warmth of the smile, the absolute composure of a man who had spent 11 years building his position so carefully that he believed it was structurally impervious. "He's the kind of man," Nathan said, "who has never had to operate from a position of genuine disadvantage, who has always been able to maneuver because he's always had enough time and enough room." He paused. "I don't think he knows how to be cornered. I think when he gets there, he'll make a mistake." Victoria looked at him. "So we corner him." "Carefully," Nathan said, "quickly, before he realizes that's what's happening." She nodded slowly. "I'm going to contact our outside legal counsel today, independently of HR. I don't want this going through internal channels until I know which internal channels are compromised." "That's the right move," Nathan said. "I'm also going to have IT pull server logs for the folders in question, the full logs admin level with chain of custody documentation. If Heller has already cleaned those logs—" "There are backup systems he doesn't have access to," Victoria said. "IT backup architecture is managed by a separate vendor. The logs exist. He may not know that." Nathan looked at her. "You already knew some of this." "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I didn't know how wrong." She paused. "I started asking questions 2 weeks ago, quietly, when the file discrepancy didn't resolve cleanly. You were investigating." "Preliminary," she said. "Nothing I could act on alone. I needed what you had." She met his eyes. "I needed you to trust me enough to bring it to me." I understood then why she had called him the night before. Not to reassure him, to tell him without saying it directly, because she was cautious, and he respected that she was already moving, that she was not waiting to see what he would do. She had been moving for 2 weeks toward the same thing he was moving toward from a different direction. Two people approaching the same problem from opposite ends of a building, neither one knowing the other was already there. "Okay," he said. "What do you need me to do in the meantime?" "Keep working," she said, "exactly as you have been. Don't change your patterns. Don't avoid Blake. Don't appear to know anything you didn't know yesterday. The moment he senses the investigation, we lose the element of surprise. And if he makes another move before you're ready, document it," she said, "exactly as you've been doing, every detail, and then call me. Not the assistant, me." She pulled a card from her desk drawer and wrote a number on the back of it, her personal cell. She slid it across the desk to him. "Anytime, day or night." He picked up the card, looked at it, looked at her. "Victoria," he said, "when this is over, whatever the outcome is, I want you to know something." She waited. "What you're doing right now," he said, "the way you're doing it, it matters, not just to me." He paused, choosing the words with care. There are people in this building who have been waiting for someone to actually see what's happening. Donna Park has been watching this company cycle through bad leadership for 22 years, and she still shows up every day because she believes it can be something worth showing up for. Garrett has been hedging for so long he's forgotten he ever had a position. He paused. "What you do with this will tell every one of them what kind of company this actually is." Something moved across Victoria's face, not a response she had ready, something that arrived without preparation and that she didn't try to manage away. "I know," she said quietly. He stood up, picked up his briefcase. At the door, he stopped. "The person who called me last night," he said, "they used the phrase 'people like you.'" Victoria looked at him steadily. "I want you to know," he said, "that I've been hearing that phrase my whole life, and I have never once let it decide anything about what I do next." He left the office. The door closed behind him softly. No lock this time. The next 4 days were the hardest kind of hard, the invisible kind where on the surface everything looks normal, and underneath it something enormous is grinding slowly toward resolution or catastrophe, and the only thing you can control is how you carry yourself through the waiting. Nathan came in. He worked. He attended meetings, delivered reports, answered emails. He spoke to Blake twice, once in a hallway, once in a cross-departmental briefing, and both times he was professionally pleasant and entirely unrevealing, and he watched Blake read him the way Blake always read him, searching for the crack, and he gave Blake nothing to find. He called Marcus on Thursday evening and told him without specific detail that things were moving. Marcus said, "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay." "Nathan." "I'm tired," Nathan admitted. "I'm tired of watching every word and reading every room and building the case while still doing the job and still going home and being—" He stopped. "Being Dad," Marcus said. "Yeah." "You've been doing that for 4 years," Marcus said. "All of it at once. The job and the grief and the kid and the whole—" He exhaled. "Man, you've been doing all of it at once for 4 years and you haven't put any of it down." "I can't put it down." "I know you can't. I'm just saying. I see it. I want you to know that somebody sees it." Nathan sat with that for a moment, the particular weight of being seen by someone who had known him long enough to see accurately. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Marcus said. "Just win this thing, and then let me take you and Lily to dinner somewhere that doesn't have a drive-through window." Nathan almost laughed. Almost. Richard Blake made his move on a Friday. It was the kind of move that Nathan had been half expecting because it was the logical escalation, not another technical manipulation, not another manufactured paper trail. Those had failed, and a cornered man who could no longer maneuver quietly would eventually stop being quiet. Blake called an emergency board presentation for Friday afternoon, the stated subject quarterly performance review of the post-acquisition integration team. The actual subject, Nathan Cole. Nathan found out about it at 11:15 from Donna Park, who appeared at his desk with a stack of copied documents that she set beside his keyboard without comment and then walked away. He looked at the stack. It was an agenda. Friday, 2 o'clock. Conference room A, executive floor. Board members, legal counsel, and the senior leadership team. His name appeared in the third-line item. Concerns regarding integration management performance and documentation integrity. He read it twice. He picked up his phone and texted Victoria a single-word agenda. She responded in under 60 seconds, "I see it. Hold." He set his phone down. He looked at his computer screen. He thought about the 43-page folder. He thought about the case file Victoria had been building in parallel with the outside legal counsel and the backup server logs and everything else she had set in motion over the past 4 days. He thought about the phone call. "People like you." I thought about his father sitting at the kitchen table late at night, adding columns of numbers, putting them down, and starting over the quiet arithmetic of a man trying to make a life out of what he had. His phone buzzed. "Victoria Legal is ready. Board members 2 through 6 are unaware of the specific content of this agenda." Blake briefed only the chairman this morning. "Then the chairman is Gerald Sterling, my father." Nathan read that sentence 3 times. Then he doesn't know yet what Blake actually has. He agreed to the meeting because Blake told him it was routine. "I'm going to talk to him in the next hour." Nathan typed, "What do you need me to do?" Her response, "Be in that meeting. Bring everything." He looked at the agenda again. Then he opened his computer and started printing. The 2 hours between 11:15 and 1:15 were the longest 2 hours of Nathan's professional life. Not because he was afraid exactly. He had done the work. He had the documentation. He had followed every thread to its source and built a case that was honest and thorough and as airtight as 3 weeks and one good friend in cybersecurity could make it. What he felt was something more specific than fear. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of a thing you've been building toward for a long time, knowing that the building is finished, but not yet knowing if the structure will hold. The particular suspended moment between having done everything you can do and finding out whether it was enough. He ate lunch at his desk, a sandwich he didn't taste. He called the babysitter and confirmed she could do a late pickup for Lily. He texted Lily a small drawing. He used a drawing app on his phone sometimes for this, a quick cartoon of a stick figure that was supposed to be him with a star above it, because she had started that years ago, and he had continued it, and she texted back a drawing of a stick figure with enormous hair that was supposed to be her with 3 stars. He put the phone in his pocket. He picked up his files. He went upstairs. The conference room was large and well lit, and had the particular quality of rooms that have hosted many decisions about people who were not in the room, a kind of residual pressure in the air, the accumulated weight of outcomes. Nathan walked in at 1:57 and took a seat at the table, not in the back where a person expecting to be discussed might sit, but at the table at the end closest to the projection screen with his files in front of him. He watched the room fill. Board members he recognized from company photographs. The legal counsel, a compact woman in a dark blazer, who he had not met, but whose name was on the outside counsel retainer, Karen Yee, 12 years of corporate litigation. The senior leadership team, including Garrett, who came in and saw Nathan at the table and went very still for exactly half a second before sitting down. Blake entered at 1:59. He was impeccable, the suit, the posture, the warmth of expression. He saw Nathan at the table, and his step did not falter, not visibly, but Nathan was watching for the thing beneath the performance, and he saw it, a very fast recalculation happening behind the eyes. Nathan was not supposed to be at the table. Nathan was supposed to be elsewhere, to be summoned to be the subject of a conversation that happened before he arrived. Nathan met his eyes and nodded pleasantly. Blake sat down. At 2 o'clock, Victoria entered. She was followed by her father, Gerald Sterling, 71 years old, the founder of Sterling Innovations, a man whose biography Nathan had read because he had made a point of knowing the history of any company he worked for. A tall man, white-haired, with the specific quality of stillness that came from decades of being the most powerful person in every room and having learned to let that be enough without performing it. Gerald Sterling sat at the head of the table. Victoria sat to his right. She looked at Nathan once, the briefest possible acknowledgement. Then she looked at the room. Gerald Sterling said, "We're here for a board presentation requested by Richard. Richard, the floor is yours." Blake stood. He was smooth. Nathan gave him that. He had the ease of someone who had delivered presentations for 11 years and had never been in the position of having been wrong about the room. He started with the integration timeline, the numbers, the metrics, the client satisfaction data. He was building to something Nathan knew, establishing context before the pivot, making the board comfortable and receptive before the accusation. I was 4 slides in when he said, "There have been concerns going back to November about the integrity of some of the integration documentation. Specifically, the documentation managed by Nathan Cole, whose appointment was..." He paused, and in the pause Nathan recognized as intentional. Somewhat unusual in its circumstances. Gerald Sterling said, "Clarify unusual." Blake said, "Mr. Cole's appointment was made directly by Ms. Sterling without the standard search process, which is within her authority as CEO, of course. But in combination with certain documentation irregularities that have since come to light, it raises questions about Richard." Victoria's voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. "Before you continue, I'd like to enter something into the record." A pause. Gerald Sterling looked at his daughter. "Of course," Blake said with a graciousness that had a very sharp edge. Victoria set a document on the table and slid copies to each board member. Karen Yee, the outside legal counsel, already had hers. "This is a preliminary findings report," Victoria said, "from an investigation that began 12 days ago, conducted with outside legal counsel and technical audit support from our backup server vendor." The investigation was initiated following anomalies in the project management system that were first flagged to me by Nathan Cole and subsequently confirmed by the server audit. The room was very quiet. The findings document 3 specific incidents of unauthorized file modification, 1 incident of timestamp manipulation in the project management backend, and 1 external client complaint that the audit has traced back to a communication channel that was accessed without authorization. She paused. The access logs, the server records, and the technical forensic analysis are included in the appendices. Karen Yee said in the flat tone of someone who has delivered a great deal of bad news professionally and has long since made peace with it. The access logs show a clear chain linking the unauthorized modifications to an IT account belonging to Thomas Heller, who is currently on administrative hold pending this investigation. Mr. Heller has provided a written statement, which is Appendix C. In that statement, he describes being asked to perform the modifications by a senior colleague whose identity is documented in the statement. Gerald Sterling looked at the document in his hands. He looked at his daughter. He looked at Richard Blake. Blake was still standing at the front of the room. His presentation was still on the screen behind him. He looked at the document. He looked at Victoria. He looked at Karen Yee. And then he did something Nathan had not expected. He sat down, quietly, without attempting another word. Nathan had seen men bluster and deflect and double down in moments of exposure. He had seen them perform outrage and indignation and wounded dignity. He had rarely seen one simply sit down. It was almost more disturbing than a fight would have been the sudden absence of the performance, the man underneath it abruptly visible and very small. Gerald Sterling said quietly, "Richard, is there anything you would like to say?" Blake said, "I'd like to speak with my attorney." Gerald Sterling nodded once. He looked at his daughter. Then he said to the room, "We'll recess for 20 minutes. Karen, please arrange to have Mr. Blake's access suspended pending the full investigation. HR and legal will follow the standard protocol from here." People began moving. The room shifted and reorganized with the particular energy of an outcome that everyone needed to process privately. Nathan stayed in his seat. Garrett leaving paused beside him. He put a hand briefly on Nathan's shoulder and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Nathan nodded. Garrett left. Donna Park was not in the room. She was not board level, but he thought about her. He sat at the table with his files in front of him while the room emptied, and he felt the adrenaline that had been sustaining him for 72 hours begin very slowly to release. He was still sitting there when Victoria came back. The room was empty except for the 2 of them. Gerald Sterling had left with Karen Yee. The board members had dispersed to make phone calls and process what they'd seen. Blake had left quietly flanked by HR, which was either a kindness or a courtesy, and Nathan wasn't sure he cared which. Victoria sat down across from him. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "How are you feeling?" I thought about the honest answer. He thought about the dishonest one. He thought about Lily's drawing of a stick figure with 3 stars, and Marcus's voice on the phone saying, "I see it," and his father's hands adding up columns of numbers in the kitchen late at night. "Tired," he said. "Yeah," she said. And he stopped, started again. Relieved, but not the way I expected to be relieved. I thought when this was over I'd feel, he searched for the word, vindicated, but I mostly just feel tired. Victoria looked at him. "Vindication is exhausting," she said, "because it means you spent a long time having to prove something that shouldn't have needed proving." He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "exactly that." Silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable. The specific silence of 2 people who have been through something together and are still processing the fact of being on the other side of it. "Your father," Nathan said. "How is he with—" He gestured at the room. "He's a good man," Victoria said without apparent irony. "He's going to be angry with himself for not seeing it before I did. That's how he processes things. He turns the failure inward and examines it. He'll do that for a few days and then he'll make a decision about what it means going forward." "What does it mean?" Nathan said. She looked at him. "It means I'm not going anywhere," she said, "and neither are you." He looked at his hands on the table. His father's hands, essentially the same shape, the same width across the knuckles, the hands of men who had fixed things their whole lives because fixing things was cheaper than replacing them, and because there was a particular kind of satisfaction in the repair that the replacement could never match. "Victoria," he said. "Nathan, why did you really hire me?" It wasn't a challenge. It was the question he had been carrying for 4 months, the one he had set aside in the interest of more immediate problems, and that had been waiting patient and unanswered at the back of everything. She was quiet for a moment, not evasive, thinking. "I told you," she said. "I remembered your name." "That's the what," he said. "I'm asking the why." She looked at the table, then at him. "Because I had built something," she said slowly. "Something I was proud of. This company, this role, this life. I had built it, and it looked successful from every angle, and I would wake up some mornings and stand in my apartment and look at all of it and feel—" She stopped. "Nothing. Just nothing." He waited. "And I kept tracing it back," she said. "Every time I asked myself when it started, when the nothing started, I would end up in a school hallway, with a boy in a brown jacket who walked away without a word and somehow made me feel for the first time in my life like I was the one who was small." Nathan was very still. "Not because of what you did," she said. "Because of what I saw. I saw someone who had every reason to be humiliated, every reason to collapse, and instead he just walked. Like the opinion of every person in that hallway was worth exactly nothing to him. Like he already knew something about himself that the rest of us were still trying to figure out." She paused. "And I never forgot that. Because I have spent 34 years in rooms full of people who are performing their own importance, and I have never once seen anyone do what you did in that hallway." He looked at her. "So yes," she said. "I hired you because I owed you something, but I also hired you because I needed to know that the person I saw in that hallway was still there, that quality, that thing you had, that absolute refusal to let the world define you, I needed to know it survived." Nathan was quiet for a long time. Outside the conference room windows, the city did what cities do. It continued enormous and indifferent and full of people who were all in the middle of their own stories, none of which had anything to do with this room or this moment. "It survived," he said finally. "I know," she said. "I can see that." He picked up his files. He stacked them, aligned them, set them in order. A habit, the physical organization of things, when the emotional organization was still sorting itself out. "I want to tell you something," he said, "about that day in the hallway." She looked at him. "When I walked away," he said, I didn't feel the way you thought I felt. I wasn't untouchable. I wasn't above it." He paused. "I went outside and I sat on the steps and I counted to 300 and I waited until I could trust my own face again. Because if I had stopped in that hallway and turned around and let them see—" He stopped, breathed. "It would have given them the thing they were looking for, and my father had taught me the way. Only a man who has had to teach himself teaches that you never give people the thing they are looking for when the thing they are looking for is your pain." Victoria was very still. "So no," he said, "I wasn't brave. I was just specific about what I was willing to show." She looked at him for a long time. Something in her expression moved through several things in sequence recognition, then something older and sadder, then something that settled into a clarity that he hadn't seen on her face before. "Nathan," she said quietly, "that is exactly what brave is." He picked up his briefcase. He stood. "I need to pick up my daughter," he said. "Go," she said. At the door he stopped, looked back. "For what it's worth," he said. "I believe you, about why you hired me." She nodded. "And Victoria." He held the door open. "The nothing you felt when you looked at what you built, I don't think you're going to feel that anymore." He left. The elevator was empty on the way down. He stood in it with his briefcase and his files and his father's hands and his daughter's 3 stars, and he rode it all the way to the ground floor, and he walked out of the building into the cold air of the city, and he did not look back. I was going to pick up Lily. He was going to make dinner something with vegetables this time, whether she liked it or not. He was going to sit at the kitchen table and watch her do homework and listen to her complain about fractions, and maybe if she asked, he would tell her that her PowerPoint advice had been in the end very sound strategy. I was going to be tired for a while. He had learned that about himself, that the resolution of hard things didn't end the tiredness, it just changed its character, moved it from the urgent kind to the earned kind, the kind you could sleep inside of instead of fighting off. I was going to be okay. He had been okay before in harder places than this, and for the first time in a long time, standing on the sidewalk in front of the building with the cold air on his face and the city moving around him in every direction, he let himself believe that okay was not the ceiling. that maybe for once okay was just the beginning. The tiredness he had predicted arrived exactly as he had expected, not dramatically, not with the crash of a man who had been running on adrenaline and finally stopped, but slowly the way weather moves in from the west over flatland. You see it coming, you know it's going to arrive, and when it does, you're still surprised by how much of the sky it covers. He slept 9 hours on Friday night. He woke up on Saturday to Lily sitting cross-legged at the foot of his bed, fully dressed, holding a piece of paper that she had apparently been waiting to present for some time. "Dad," she said with the formal energy of someone chairing a meeting, "I made a list." He pushed himself up against the headboard. "A list of what?" "Things we should do today." She unfolded the paper. It had been folded into quarters, which suggested premeditation. Number 1, pancakes. Number 2, the park with the ducks. Number 3, you have to push me on the swings for at least 10 minutes because last time you stopped after 6 and said your arms were tired and Dad, you go to the gym. He looked at his daughter. She was wearing her red rain jacket over her pajama top because she had apparently started getting dressed and been distracted partway through. Her hair was in a ponytail that she had clearly done herself slightly off-center, entirely confident. Number 4, she continued, we rent a movie from the library, not the streaming ones, the actual DVDs, because Miss Patterson says physical media is more reliable, and I think she's right. And number 5, she paused for effect, hot chocolate, but the real kind, not the packet kind. He looked at the list. He looked at his daughter. He thought about the conference room and the files and Richard Blake sitting down quietly while his entire architecture collapsed, and about Victoria's face when she said that is exactly what brave is, and about standing on the sidewalk feeling like okay, might not be the ceiling. "Lily," he said. "Yeah. Push the swings back to 12 minutes. She grinned the full one, the one that was entirely her mother's, and launched herself off the bed. Haimata pancakes, real ones from scratch with blueberries because she liked blueberries, and because sometimes after a hard week, the making of something from raw ingredients felt like a necessary act, like proof that ordinary things were still possible. He stood at the stove and he cooked, and Lily sat at the counter telling him about something that had happened at school involving a substitute teacher, a class hamster, and a sequence of events that she described with such narrative momentum that he found himself genuinely invested in the outcome. "And then," she said, "Mrs. Calloway found him behind the projector cart and she screamed, and the substitute said, 'Ma'am, he's just a hamster,' and I thought that was the funniest thing anybody had ever said." He slid the pancakes onto her plate, and the hamster was okay. "He was fine. His name is Biscuit." She poured syrup with the careful attention of a chemist. "Dad, can we get a hamster?" "No." "Why?" "Because we already have a 10-year-old. I'm 8. Same energy." She threw a blueberry at him. He caught it. She looked impressed despite herself. They went to the park. He pushed the swings for 12 minutes, and his arms were in fact fine. They fed the ducks with the end of a bread loaf that had gone slightly stale, and that Lily had specifically saved for this purpose, without telling him, which he discovered when she produced it from her jacket pocket, with the satisfied air of someone who has planned ahead. He stood at the edge of the pond and watched his daughter throw bread crusts and laugh when the ducks mobbed each other. And he thought about nothing in particular, which was itself a kind of luxury he had forgotten he was allowed. On the drive home, Lily was quiet for a few minutes, the rare contemplative quiet that descended on her, sometimes without warning, usually preceding a question he hadn't prepared for. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." "Did you fix it, the work thing?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah," he said. "I fixed it." "Was it the bad person?" He glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "There's always a bad person," she said, with the certainty of someone who has processed a great deal of narrative in 8 years. "In every problem, somebody who made it complicated on purpose." "Yes," he said. "There was someone who made it complicated on purpose." "What happened to them?" "They had to face the consequences," he said, "of what they did." She nodded, slowly processing this. "Good," she said finally, with a simplicity that he envied. Then, "Did the boss lady help?" I thought about how to answer that. "She did," he said. "She came through." Lily looked out the window at the passing street. "I'm glad," she said. "I thought she might." He glanced at her again. "What made you think that?" She shrugged. "The way you talked about her," she said, "like she was complicated. People who are just bad aren't complicated. Complicated means they're trying." I was quiet for the rest of the drive. thinking about what his 8-year-old had just said with the casual authority of obvious truth. Monday arrived the way Mondays do, after significant Fridays, with a specific altered quality in the air of the workplace, the feeling of a room that has rearranged itself while you weren't looking. Blake's corner office was dark. His assistant's desk had been cleared. The absence of both was conspicuous in the way that gaps in a skyline are conspicuous. You register not the missing thing itself, but the changed shape of the space around it. People didn't speak openly about it. Corporate environments rarely processed dramatic events openly. What happened instead was a kind of collective recalibration, people adjusting their positions, their alliances, their understanding of the building's architecture, both literal and political. Nathan watched it happen over the course of the morning with the detached attention of someone who had predicted the weather and was now simply observing that it had arrived. I was in his office at 10:15 when Gerald Sterling appeared in the doorway. Nathan stood. "Please," Gerald said with a gesture that indicated this was unnecessary. He stepped inside and closed the door, not because he wanted privacy from the hallway. Nathan understood immediately, but because he was the kind of man who closed doors when he was about to say something he meant. He sat down across from Nathan's desk. Gerald Sterling in person was different from Gerald Sterling in photographs. The photographs gave you the biography, the successful founder, the patriarch, the industry figure who had spent 40 years building something from an idea and a lease agreement. The person across the desk had all of that in him, but also something else. A quality that came from age and from the particular kind of experience that age accumulates if you've been paying attention. He looked like a man who had stopped needing to appear a particular way and had arrived through that surrender at something more authentic. "I owe you an apology," Gerald said. Nathan said, "Sir, you don't need to." "I'm going to say it," Gerald said with the pleasant finality of a man who was not accustomed to being redirected, but was not being unkind about it. "I approved that meeting. Blake came to me Thursday morning with a very clean story. He told me there were integration concerns that needed board-level visibility. He used language that was designed to sound procedural and sound simultaneously alarming." He paused. "I have been dealing with men like Richard Blake for 40 years, and I still let the procedure language fool me. That's a failure on my part." Nathan said, "He's very good at it." "He was," Gerald said. "Past tense." He folded his hands in his lap. "Victoria has already completed the formal action. His separation terms are being processed by HR and outside counsel, and there will be no public statement that preserves his reputation at the expense of yours. I want you to know that specifically. The record will be accurate." "I appreciate that," Nathan said. "Tom Heller has cooperated fully with the investigation, which legal has noted in their recommendation regarding his situation." Gerald paused. "He's a young man who made a very bad decision in service of a very bad actor. That's not nothing, but it's also not an excuse." Nathan nodded. Gerald was quiet for a moment. He looked at the desk between them. At the photograph Nathan kept there, his father taken outside the repair shop the year Nathan graduated college. His father in his work clothes squinting slightly into the sun, looking not at the camera, but at something slightly to the left of it, with an expression that Nathan had spent years trying to interpret, and had finally decided was just the look of a man thinking about the next thing. "Your father," Gerald said. "Yes." "What does he do?" "He's retired," Nathan said. "He ran a repair shop for 31 years, Gerald nodded slowly. "My father ran a hardware store," he said, "for 22 years. People thought building a company was my escape from that, from the hardware store, from the neighborhood, from—" He stopped. "It wasn't, though. It was the same work, just a different scale." He looked at Nathan. "You understand that?" "I understand that," Nathan said. Gerald stood. Nathan stood with him. They shook hands, a real handshake, the kind that communicated something beyond professional courtesy. "My daughter," Gerald said at the door. He paused, searching for the right words, and the searching itself told Nathan something about Gerald Sterling, that he was a man who cared about accuracy, who didn't reach for the easy sentence when the right one required a moment. "She's been the CEO of this company for 7 months, and she's already the best leader it's ever had, including me." He said it without apparent difficulty, the way you say a thing when you've already made peace with it. "I just thought you should know that, since you seem to matter to each other in a way that I don't fully understand yet, but that I'm not going to stand in the way of." He left. Nathan stood in his office for a full minute after the door closed. Then he sat down at his desk and did the work that was waiting for him because the work was always waiting, and because some things didn't pause for significance, and because doing the work was still after everything the most honest response he knew to the world. Victoria found him in the break room at 2:30 in the afternoon, which was either a coincidence or wasn't, and he had stopped believing in relevant coincidences approximately 3 weeks ago. She poured coffee. He already had a cup. They stood on opposite sides of the small table that held the coffee maker and a bowl of fruit that nobody ever touched. "Your father came to see me," Nathan said. "I know," she said. "He told me. He said you're the best leader this company has had. He's biased. He said including himself." She looked at her coffee. "He's still biased." "He didn't sound biased," Nathan said. "He sounded like a man telling a fact." She looked up. Something moved across her face, not modesty exactly, something more complicated. The expression of someone who wanted very badly to believe something and hadn't yet figured out how to let themselves. "I have a meeting with the board tomorrow," she said. "Full investigation results, formal record correction. There'll be a statement issued internally by end of week that makes clear specifically and on the record that the documentation concerns raised about your work were fabricated and that your performance record throughout the integration has been exemplary, Victoria. And," she said, "I'm recommending to the board that you be appointed Director of Integration and Strategy, which is a new position. I created it this morning." She picked up her coffee cup. "It didn't exist before, but it should have. It requires someone who can run a project, read a room document, everything perfectly, and refuse to be moved when someone tries to rewrite reality around them." She looked at him. "You know anyone like that?" He looked at her for a moment. Then, "What's the salary?" She named a number. He was quiet. "Negotiable," she said. "It's not the number," he said. "What is it?" He set down his coffee cup. He looked at her directly the way he had learned to look at things he needed to understand fully before deciding. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it the same way you answered when I asked if you knew this was happening. Honestly, even if it's not what I want to hear." "Okay," she said. "Is this a position I'm getting because I earned it," he said, "or a position you created because you feel like you owe me something?" She didn't hesitate. "Both," she said. "And I don't think those two things are in conflict. You earned it because you built an airtight case under pressure while simultaneously performing your existing job without a visible crack. You earned it because you came to me with the evidence when you had every reason not to trust me, and you were right to be unsure and you came anyway. You earned it because you sat in that conference room on Friday and you let the work speak instead of making it personal." She paused. "And yes, I also feel like I owe you something. But the debt and the qualification are both real. They don't cancel each other out." I thought about that. He thought about Lily saying complicated means they're trying. "Okay," he said. "Okay, you'll take it." "Okay, I'll think about it," he said. "Until tomorrow morning." She almost smiled. "Fair." He picked up his coffee. At the door, he stopped. "Victoria, can I ask you something else?" "Yes." "The day you hired me," he said, "when you called me into your office, you had been preparing for months, you said. You knew what you were going to say." "Yes." "What were you going to say, the speech you had prepared?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was going to say that I was sorry that I had hired you because I believed in your qualifications, that what happened between us 20 years ago was something I had addressed in therapy and processed, and that I didn't expect it to affect our working relationship, and that I hoped we could both be professional about it." She paused. "I had it very well organized, very controlled. What happened to it?" She looked at him. "You walked in the door," she said, "and you looked exactly the same, not physically, in the way that matters. You still looked like someone who was going to put one foot in front of the other, regardless of what the hallway thought about it." She paused. "And everything I had prepared seemed suddenly very small compared to what I actually wanted to say. Which was, do you remember me?" She said it simply. "Because I needed to know if I was real to you, or just a bad memory with a corner office." He thought about that for a long time after he left the break room. He carried it back to his desk and worked around it for the rest of the afternoon, the way you work around something that requires more space than you're ready to give it yet. He called his father that evening. His father answered on the third ring, the way he always answered, not rushed, not delayed, just present as though he had been doing something and set it down when the phone rang. "Nathan," his father said. "Hey, Dad." "How's Lily?" She negotiated 12 minutes on the swings on Saturday and informed me that my gym attendance was statistically inconsistent with my claims of arm fatigue. His father laughed. It was the same laugh Nathan had been hearing his whole life, low, genuine, starting slow and building. "She's something," his father said. "She's something," Nathan agreed. They talked for a few minutes about ordinary things. The repair shop his father still visited sometimes, though he was retired just to sit in it and do small projects because 40 years of habit didn't leave cleanly. A neighbor's fence that his father had helped repair last weekend. The weather in his father's city, which was slightly warmer than Nathan's. Then Nathan said, "Dad, I want to tell you about something that happened this week." He told him. Not everything, not the phone call in the driveway, not the technical details of the file manipulation, but the shape of it. A man who tried to take what Nathan had built, a woman who helped him fight back, the board meeting and the investigation and the outcome. His father listened the way he always listened, without interruption, without filling the silences. When Nathan finished, his father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you all right?" "Yeah," Nathan said. "I'm okay. Not worn down." "Some," Nathan admitted. "That's all right," his father said. "Getting worn down means you were doing the work." Nathan was quiet. "Nathan," his father said, "can I tell you something? I've been thinking about saying it for a while." "Say it." "I watch you," his father said. "The way you do things, the way you raise Lily, the way you carry your job, the way you've rebuilt since." He paused. Didn't say the name. He never said the name, not because he'd forgotten, but because some things were honored by their weight and not their pronunciation. "Since you've been alone." Another pause. "I spent a lot of years being proud of you in the quiet way, the way I do things. But I think I waited too long sometimes. I think I assumed you knew." "Dad, I'm saying it," his father said. Not with force, with the same quality Nathan had heard in Gerald Sterling's voice that morning. The voice of a man who had stopped needing to be precise and had become it. "You are the best thing I ever did. Not because you're successful, because you're good. You're a good man and a good father, and when somebody tried to make you small, you didn't let them. And that's not something I taught you." He paused. "That's something you found yourself somewhere, and I have never once been able to figure out where you found it." Nathan sat in his car in his driveway. The porch light was on. The babysitter's car was at the curb. He held the phone and he let himself have the moment, fully, without managing it or organizing it or deciding what it was allowed to mean. He just let it happen the way good things sometimes need to happen when you've spent too long bracing for the other kind. "I found it from you," he said finally. "I don't know if you know that, but I did." His father didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Come visit soon. Lily can help me with the fence project next door. She'll have opinions." "She always has opinions," Nathan said. "Good," his father said. "The world needs more of those." After they hung up, Nathan sat in the car for a few minutes, in the way he had taken to sitting in cars when he needed to transition between the version of himself that existed in the world and the version that existed inside his front door. The father version, the one that read bedtime stories without cracking and drew star-stick figures on a phone app and made pancakes from scratch because some things were worth the extra steps. I was thinking about what his father had said. "That's something you found yourself somewhere." He thought about Victoria saying, "I needed to know if I was real to you." He thought about what it meant to be real to someone, not as a memory, not as a symbol, not as a debt or a regret. Real the way people are real when they occupy actual space in each other's lives, imperfect and present and still becoming. He had not allowed himself to think about Victoria that way, had been careful not to. There were too many layers between them, the history, the power dynamic, the wound that hadn't fully closed, the trust that was still calibrating. He had kept it clean and professional and at a precise distance. But sitting in his driveway in the cold with his father's voice still in his ear, he allowed himself to notice something. He had been looking forward to seeing her in the break room. Not as a professional's encounter, not as a step in the ongoing negotiation of trust and accountability. He had been looking forward to it the way you look forward to something you can't fully justify, something that requires honesty with yourself to even admit. He noticed it. He didn't do anything with it. He filed it in the part of himself that was still learning what was possible. Then he got out of the car and went inside to relieve the babysitter and check Lily's homework and be, for the rest of the evening, entirely the person his daughter needed him to be. I went to Victoria's office the next morning at 8:45, 15 minutes before the time she had given him. Her assistant started to say something. Nathan said, "I'll wait," pleasantly but without ambiguity. He waited 6 minutes. Then Victoria opened her office door herself, apparently having been notified he was there, and said, "Come in." I went in. He sat in the informal seating area, the two chairs facing each other across the low table, which is where she had taken him on the first day, and which he had come to understand was where she put conversations she considered important rather than procedural. She sat across from him. "I'll take the position," he said. She nodded. "With one condition," he said. "What condition?" "When something is wrong in this company," he said, "I bring it to you directly, not through channels, not through procedures, not through assistants. Directly. And you do the same with me. We don't let things build until they require a 43-page folder and an outside legal team." "Agreed," she said. "And—" He stopped. She waited. "I'm still figuring out how to trust you," he said. "I want to be honest about that. It's better than it was. Significantly better. But I'm still figuring it out, and I don't want to pretend otherwise." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I'm not asking you to pretend." "What are you asking?" "Just to keep going," she said. "Keep showing up. Let it be what it's going to be without forcing it." She paused. "That's all I know how to ask. That's all I think is honest to ask." He looked at her. He thought about what Lily had said complicated means they're trying. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'll keep showing up," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then something changed in her expression, not dramatically, not with announcement. Just a small settling, the specific quality of relief that arrives when something you were afraid wasn't going to happen, happens. "Welcome to Sterling Innovations Director," she said. He stood, held out his hand. She shook it. The handshake lasted 1 second longer than professional. Neither of them moved to end it at exactly the moment either of them could have. Then they did. He walked to the door. At the threshold he paused. He had developed this habit, he realized. Standing at thresholds, giving himself 1 extra second at the boundary between rooms, between one version of things and the next. "Victoria," he said. "Nathan. I remember you," he said. "I just want you to know that I don't mean that the same way I meant it the first time you asked." She was quiet. "I mean it the way it's supposed to mean it now," he said. "The way people mean it when they're talking about the present." He left. The door closed behind him softly, no lock. And he walked down the hallway and into the morning that was waiting for him, with everything still to be built and everything worth building, and with the specific, particular, hard-earned feeling of a man who has finally stopped waiting for the floor to fall out, not because the floor is guaranteed, but because he has decided somewhere deep and irreversible that he is done organizing his life around the expectation of collapse. He had work to do. He went and did it. The internal statement went out on a Wednesday. 3 paragraphs, clean, direct, unambiguous. It named the investigation, confirmed the findings, cleared Nathan Cole's record completely, and on the official company record, and announced his appointment as Director of Integration and Strategy effective, the first of the following month. It was signed by Victoria Sterling, CEO, and countersigned by Gerald Sterling, founder and Chairman Emeritus. A detail that Victoria had not mentioned to Nathan in advance, and that he noticed when he read it standing at his desk at 9:17 in the morning, phone in hand, with his coffee getting cold beside his keyboard. He read it twice. He set the phone down. He picked up his coffee, which was in fact cold, and drank it anyway, because he had long since stopped requiring his coffee to be at the correct temperature and had started requiring it to simply exist. The responses came quickly. Not dramatically, this was a corporate environment, and people had learned to modulate their enthusiasm. But there was a quality to the emails and the hallway nods and the slightly longer eye contact that told him the statement had landed the way statements land when they confirm what most people already suspected but couldn't say out loud. Donna Park stopped by his office at 10:15 and set a small plant on the corner of his desk without comment. It was a succulent, the kind that thrives on neglect. He looked at it and then looked at her. "Same as hers," Donna said, nodding toward the executive floor with the serenity of someone who had spent 22 years noticing everything and selecting very carefully what to communicate. Then she walked away. Garrett stopped by at noon. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and his expression doing the thing it did when he was working up to something he had rehearsed. "Nathan," he said, "I want to say that I should have—" "Garrett," Nathan said, You helped when it mattered. The Callaway documentation. You looked at it and you called it clean. I should have done more than that. Maybe, Nathan said. But you did what you did, and I'm recording what you did, not what you could have done. Those are different columns. Garrett looked at him. Something in his expression shifted relief partially, but also something that looked like the beginning of a decision. I want to be more useful, he said. Going forward, to you and to Victoria. I've been coasting the center line for a long time, staying out of things, and I've been telling myself that was professionalism. What do you tell yourself now? Nathan said. Garrett was quiet for a moment. That it was just fear dressed in a professional suit, he said. Nathan nodded slowly. That's a hard thing to say out loud. Yeah, Garrett said. It is. He straightened. Lunch sometime this week. Thursday, Nathan said. There's a place 2 blocks east that has an actual wine list. My friend Marcus made me promise to start eating at places with wine lists. You can be the first experiment. Garrett looked mildly surprised. Then he almost smiled. Thursday, he said. He left. Nathan looked at the succulent. He looked at the photograph of his father. He looked at the work on his desk that was waiting to be done in his new capacity, the expanded scope of it, the additional weight and the additional meaning. I thought about how much had changed in 4 months, and how nothing had changed the way he had expected it to. He had expected the change to feel like arrival, like reaching a destination after a long drive, the specific relief of stopping. What it actually felt like was more like a road that had finally straightened after a long series of turns. You were still moving, but you could see further ahead, and seeing further ahead was its own particular kind of relief. He started working. March arrived and brought with it the end of the fiscal quarter and the first full integration review under Nathan's new title. He spent 2 weeks preparing it with a team of 6 people, 3 of whom had initially been skeptical of him, and 2 of whom had come around entirely, and one of whom a young analyst named Priya, who had been at the company for 8 months, and who reminded him in her relentless precision and her refusal to soften her conclusions for comfort of himself at 26, he had already identified as someone to watch and develop. The review was presented to the board on a Thursday afternoon. It was thorough, honest, and in 2 places delivered findings that were not what the board wanted to hear. Nathan presented those sections without softening them with the same direct clarity he brought to the sections that contained good news, because he had decided long ago that the value of honest reporting was not in the delivery of good news, but in the credibility it lent to difficult news. You had to earn the right to be believed when things were hard, and you earned it by being accurate when things were fine. Gerald Sterling, sitting at the head of the table, listened to the difficult sections with his hands folded and his expression giving nothing away. Then when Nathan finished, he said, "This is the first integration review in 11 years that I've believed completely." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the board moved on because boards move on, and because the highest compliment in that room was being taken seriously enough to work from. After the meeting, Victoria found him in the hallway. "My father said something to you," she said. "He said the review was credible," Nathan said. "He said it was the first one in 11 years he believed completely." She looked at him. "He doesn't say things like that." "I noticed he chose his words carefully," Nathan said. "He spent 40 years watching people tell him what he wanted to hear," she said. "He can tell the difference." She paused. "So can I." They walked together toward the elevator, not intentionally, just in the same direction at the same pace, the way people who work in proximity develop habits of movement without deciding to. He pressed the button. They waited. "How's Lily?" she asked. He glanced at her. She had asked about Lily twice before, once in passing, once in a context that felt professional. This was different. This was the tone of someone asking because they wanted to know. "She's good," he said. "She has a vocabulary word of the week now. This week it's meticulous. She used it to describe the way she organized her colored pencils, which she does by both color and frequency of use." Victoria looked at him. "She sounds extraordinary." "She's 8 and she has opinions about pencil taxonomy," Nathan said. "So yes, extraordinary is accurate." The elevator arrived. They stepped in. "Nathan," Victoria said as the doors closed. "Yeah, I'd like to meet her sometime." She said it the way she said important things, without performing it, without the careful framing of someone managing an impression. Just the sentence with nothing else attached to it. "If that's something you'd be open to, at some point, no urgency." He looked at the elevator doors, thought about Lily's 3-star stick figure drawing, thought about his daughter at the kitchen table saying complicated means they're trying with the absolute authority of a person who has not yet learned to doubt the things she knows. "Yeah," he said. "I think I'd be open to that." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. "Good," Victoria said. They walked out into the lobby and went their separate directions, and Nathan carried that single exchange for the rest of the day with the careful attention of something he didn't want to examine too hard yet, but didn't want to lose either. He drove to his father's house on a Saturday in late March, 3 hours south with Lily in the back seat, asking questions about the passing landscape with the sustained curiosity of someone who has recently been told that asking questions is how you learn things and has taken this instruction to its logical conclusion. "Dad, why do some silos have domed tops and some have flat tops?" "Engineering and age," Nathan said. "Older ones tend to be flat, which is structurally stronger. Dome." She was quiet for 30 seconds, which was apparently the processing time required. And then, "Why don't they make all the old ones into dome tops then?" "Because it's expensive to change the shape of something that already exists." She considered this. "That seems like a bad reason," she said. "Most things that are hard to change seem like bad reasons when you're 8, Nathan said. "I'm not wrong, though," she said. "No," he admitted. "You're not." His father was on the porch when they pulled into the driveway. Lily was out of the car before Nathan had fully stopped moving, with the momentum of a child who has been contained in a back seat for 3 hours and has a great deal of energy that requires immediate expenditure. She hit the porch steps at speed, and his father caught her in the kind of hug that didn't need describing, because anyone who has ever been a grandchild or held one knows exactly the quality and weight of it. Nathan got out of his car and stood in the driveway for a moment, watching his father and his daughter, the two people who constituted the permanent architecture of his life. Everyone else was real, everyone else mattered, but these two were the structure, the load-bearing walls, the things that if they were standing, meant the house was still standing. "Dad," Lily said, already pulling his father toward the backyard, "I heard there's a fence project." "There is," his father said. "What kind of wood?" His father looked over her head at Nathan with an expression that communicated genuine delight. "Cedar," he said. "Good choice," Lily said authoritatively. "Cedar is resistant to moisture and insects. I looked it up." Nathan followed them around the back of the house, his hands in his jacket pockets, the March air still carrying the last edge of winter, but with something else underneath it now, something that was almost warmth, the tentative advance scout of a season that was coming whether or not you were ready for it. They worked on the fence for 2 hours, Nathan and his father doing the structural work, digging, leveling, setting posts, while Lily supervised with a focus that would have been comedic if it hadn't been so precise. She had opinions about spacing. She had opinions about the angle of the crossbeams. At one point, she produced a measuring tape from the toolbox without being asked and checked the interval between posts, herself announced that the third one was off by a 1/4 inch, and looked at both Nathan and his father with the expression of someone who has confirmed a suspicion. His father looked at the measurement. He looked at Lily. He looked at Nathan. "She's right," his father said. "She usually is," Nathan said. His father laughed the low building laugh and reset the post. That evening, his father made dinner the way he had always made dinner, with attention and without fuss, standing at the stove and moving between pots with the practiced ease of a man who had been cooking his own meals for 50 years and had long since stopped thinking about it as a task and simply done it the way he breathed. Lily sat at the kitchen table and did her homework and asked his father questions about the tools in the garage, and his father answered each one with the same patient precision he had once used to answer Nathan's questions about the same tools in the same kitchen 25 years earlier. Nathan sat at the table and watched them and felt the specific quiet weight of continuity, not the heavy kind, not the kind that presses down, but the kind that holds you in place in the good way, the kind that reminds you what you are part of. "Dad," he said. His father looked up from the stove. "Thank you," Nathan said, "for the phone call." His father looked at him for a moment. Then he turned back to the stove. "You were thanking me for saying what should have been said 10 years ago, he said. "Don't thank me for catching up." "I'm thanking you for saying it when you did," Nathan said. "That's when I needed it, not 10 years ago." His father was quiet for a moment, stirring something. Then, "You're a good father, Nathan. You're a better father than I was. I want you to know I can see that." Lily looked up from her homework. She looked at Nathan, then at his father, Then she went back to her homework with the tact of a child who has understood that the adults are having a moment, and it would be unkind to interrupt it, which was a form of emotional intelligence Nathan would have been proud of at any age. "You were enough, Dad," Nathan said. "You were exactly enough." His father didn't respond to that with words. He nodded once to the pot he was stirring and turned up the heat slightly, and that was enough. Between men who had the same habit of saying important things simply and then letting them stand a nod to the pot was a full sentence. April. Nathan's team delivered the first full quarter under his directorship with results that cleared every target he had set and 2 that he hadn't. Priya brought him the numbers on a Tuesday morning with the specific, barely contained energy of someone who has worked very hard and wants to see that it has registered. "This is good work," Nathan told her, looking at the report. "It's excellent work," she said without arrogance, just accuracy. "Yes," he said, "it is." She looked at him. "What do we do with it?" "We present it to Victoria and the board Thursday, and we tell the truth about which of it was skill and which of it was favorable conditions, because the board will respect us more for knowing the difference." Priya looked at him the way she sometimes looked at him, the evaluating look, the one that was measuring not his authority, but his judgment. She had done it from the beginning, and he had understood immediately that it was not disrespect, but the opposite, the kind of attention you pay when you're deciding whether someone is worth learning from. "Okay," she said. And then we set harder targets for Q2, he said, "because this quarter proved we can do this, which means we should be doing more of it." She nodded, apparently satisfied. At the door, "Nathan, why did you take this job?" He looked up. "What do you mean?" "This specific job, director. You could have gone somewhere else after everything that happened. Clean start, new company. Why did you stay?" "I thought about it." He thought about the honest answer versus the professional answer and decided that with Priya, the distinction was both unnecessary and counterproductive. "Because leaving would have been the easy thing," he said, "and I have a lifelong allergy to doing the easy thing when the right thing is still available." She looked at him for a moment. "Also," he said, "the CEO is worth staying for." Priya looked at him with an expression that was carefully not an expression. "Professionally speaking," she said. "Professionally speaking," he confirmed. She left. He was almost certain she was smiling in the hallway, but he couldn't confirm it and thought it was probably better that way. Victoria knocked on his office door on a Friday afternoon in late April, which was unusual. She typically communicated through her assistant or by phone. She knocked and waited, which was also unusual, and when he said come in, she opened the door but didn't fully enter. She stood in the threshold in the way that people stand when they have something to say and haven't decided how much room it's going to need. "I'm going to visit my mother this weekend," she said. "She lives in Connecticut. She and my father divorced when I was 22, and I see her 4 times a year, and it's always—" She paused. "Complicated." Nathan waited. "I'm telling you this," she said, "because I have been wanting to tell someone who would actually understand the word complicated without requiring me to explain what I mean by it. And you are the only person I know right now who understands it that way." He looked at her. "What happened between them?" he said. "If you want to tell me." "My father chose the company," she said. "Over and over for 20 years he chose the company, and my mother ran out of versions of herself that could keep accepting that." She paused. "She's not bitter. She's remarkable. She built a whole second life. She teaches art at a community college in Hartford. She has a garden. She has friends who know her real name, not her married name." Victoria paused. "She's happier than she was, but there's a version of my childhood that can't be recovered. And when I see her, I see that version in her face sometimes, and I don't know what to do with it except just be there." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Go," he said. "Be there. That's what she needs. Not a fix. Just you showing up." Victoria looked at him. "That's what I had to learn too," he said. "After my wife died, people kept wanting to fix the unfixable thing and not understanding that fixing wasn't the point. The point was showing up in the room with the unfixable thing and staying there." He paused. "Your mother knows you can't give her the 20 years back. She doesn't need you to. She just needs you to come to Hartford and sit in her garden and be her daughter." Victoria was quiet for a long time. "How do you know these things?" she said. "I learned them the hard way," he said. "The only way they stick." She nodded slowly. "I'll go," she said. "I was already going, but I needed to hear it framed that way." "I know," he said. She started to leave, then she stopped. Nathan. Yeah. I would like to have dinner sometime. Not a work dinner, not a meeting dressed up as dinner. Actual dinner outside this building where neither of us is anyone's employee or anyone's boss. She said it with the clean directness of someone who has decided to stop managing around a thing and simply say it. If you're interested. He looked at her. He thought about the threshold moment he had been sitting inside of since January, the not yet of it, the careful distance, the trust still calibrating all of it, real all of it worth respecting. He also thought about standing in his driveway in the cold, noticing that he had been looking forward to seeing her in a break room and filing it in the part of himself that was still learning what was possible. He had filed enough. He thought it was time to stop filing and start reading. Yes, he said. I'm interested. She almost smiled. The full kind, the one he hadn't seen from her before. Not the professional smile, not the composed expression of a CEO, but the actual one, slightly unguarded, slightly surprised at itself. Good, she said. She left. Nathan looked at his desk, at the succulent Donna Park had put on the corner of it, at the photograph of his father, at the window through which the city did its enormous, indifferent, necessary work. He thought about the door that had started everything. The click of the lock, Victoria turning from the window with that expression he hadn't been able to name. The question she had asked that had opened 20 years of sealed history in the space of 4 words. He had walked into that office expecting a routine meeting, and had walked out of it into something he still didn't have complete language for, a story that wasn't finished, a trust that was still building a future that had not yet declared its shape. But that was the thing about the future. It didn't declare. It arrived. Piece by piece, decision by decision, day by day, in the ordinary accumulation of showing up and doing the work and refusing to let the world tell you what you were worth. He had learned that from his father in a small kitchen above a repair shop, watching a man add up columns of numbers and start again and again and again, not because the math was easy, but because the math was necessary, and the man doing it believed somewhere underneath all the exhaustion that it was going to come out right. It had come out right. Not the way Nathan had expected. Not on any timeline he would have designed. Not without cost, without grief, without the kind of hard-won patience that leaves marks you carry forever. But right. Undeniably, irreversibly, completely right. On a Tuesday morning in May, Nathan Cole walked into Sterling Innovations at 8:50, nodded to Donna Park, who was already at her desk, and who raised one eyebrow in the manner of a woman who noticed everything and communicated in fractions, and took the elevator to the 14th floor, where his team was already assembled, and his calendar was already full, and his window overlooked the same city it had always overlooked, but from a different floor now with a slightly longer view. Priya had the Q2 targets on his desk. Garrett had sent a draft agenda for the Thursday board prep. His assistant had fielded 2 calls from Callaway and one from a new prospective client that looked promising, and had noted on the call sheet that Callaway's account manager had specifically requested Nathan's involvement going forward because, and this was in the note verbatim, he's the one who actually knows what he's doing. He sat down at his desk. He read the Q2 targets. He pulled up the board prep draft. He thought about dinner not yet scheduled, still ahead of him, still part of the future that hadn't declared its shape, but was clearly coming because futures came. That was what they did. I thought about Lily at home this morning, eating cereal. There was cereal again. He had replenished it on Sunday, telling Mrs. Reyes about the fence project and the quarter-inch post correction, with the authority of someone who had done structural work and had the measuring tape to prove it. He thought about his father at his kitchen table. He thought about a hallway 20 years ago and a brown corduroy jacket and 6 minutes on school steps counting. I thought about what it meant that the girl who had stood in the center of that hallway had become the woman who was willing to say out loud, "And on the record, I was wrong. You were worth more than I showed you, and I am going to spend a significant portion of the rest of my professional life proving it." He thought about what it meant that he had been able to hear her, that he had built something in himself over 36 years of difficult and irreversible experience that was strong enough to receive that apology without collapsing into it and without flinching away from it. That could hold both the wound and the repair at the same time and understand that the two were not in contradiction. That could sit across from Victoria Sterling and say, "I'm still figuring out how to trust you," and then show up the next morning and try. That was not a small thing. I was not going to treat it like a small thing. He opened the first file. He started working. And Nathan Cole, 36 years old, single father, project manager, turned director, son of a man who fixed things for 31 years and never stopped believing the math would come out right, did what he had always done in every room and every season, through every version of hard that life had asked him to carry. He put one foot in front of the other. He kept going. And this time, for the first time in a very long time, going forward and going home, were pointing in exactly the same direction.